Hello, welcome to another episode of the Cool Tools Show and Tell. Our special guest this week is Adam Grosser. And Adam, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and watchers?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I am sitting in my workshop in San Carlos, California, which is the place that my wife always knows where she can find me. This is a lot of people, when they have a little bit of a success in their personal life, buy a lot of things. I only managed to buy a lot of tools to express my love of craft. So I am an engineer by training. I have been lucky to work at some wonderful places like Apple and Lucasfilm and Sony along the way. Then I got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug and helped start 3 companies that built a lot of high-speed networking equipment, which ultimately allowed me to indulge my passion, which is building things in and around mobility. So in this workshop, we have built 4 airplanes, 5 boats, 20 cars and motorcycles, 3 hydrofoils, and a drive-by-wire electric trike, and countless other things over the course of the last 25 years.
That sounds exciting. So I'm sure along the way, you've uncovered a couple of tools that maybe we don't know about that we should know about. So what would be a good first choice for you?
This is a basic tool that is no longer made anymore. And there was a lovely, lovely tool maker that up in Oregon named Bridge City Toolworks. And they made a line of woodworking tools that were highly functional, but also aesthetically beautiful. For those of you listening to the podcast, I'm holding up a tool that is an automated center finder. And it saves in an incredible amount of time, because you merely adjust the 2 sliding members of the tool, and a scribe in the center creates a center line. So without measurement,
I'm going to interrupt. There's a little description of it. So it's about 6 inches long. There's some sliding wood members, 2 of them, and the whole thing they're kind of like a roughly rectangular shape. But there's some brass.
There's brass guide pins that ride on the outside of whatever it is you're trying to find the center of, and it makes woodwork incredibly both accurate, pleasurable, and extremely quick, because it takes the manual process of measuring the dimension of, say, a piece of wood or a piece of metal, scribing a center line, and making sure that you had done it in a square, repeatable fashion.
So are there contemporary versions of it? That looks kind of antique-y. It's wood and brass.
Yeah, no, it looks antique-y. That was Bridge City's shtick, if you will. So they took old tools, made them in a beautifully modern way. These are all CNC'd.
Okay.
Very, very precise. But they are contemporary tools. So the sad part was Bridge City went out of business a few years ago. I bought almost one of almost everything they've made. They make beautiful, beautiful tools for scribing offsets on the center, on radii, for creating layouts of all different kinds of things. And I've used this. I've built a lot of acoustic guitars as well. And their tools have been front and center in my guitar making.
Right. So another way of maybe asking that is, besides this one from Bridgeport, which I assume is not being made, are there other makers of the same kind of tool?
There really aren't. In fact, I have never seen one of these with the small rack and pinion that guarantees that it stays parallel and square. And so there is quite an active market for used Bridge City tools, because they are made exceptionally well and will certainly outlast my lifetime, and I hope to pass them on to children.
And so the if someone wanted to find these, presumably maybe there's an eBay market on these. They're
There
called the
is
Bridge City Center Finder.
Bridge City Tool Works, and
No, the name of the tool,
oh, this is a center finder.
Center Finder.
And that's all it says on it. Self-centering scribe. But the issue is, Kevin, that somebody has tried to resuscitate the company. So if you look for Bridge City tools now, they exist, but they're not nearly of the same quality that they were a few years ago.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good caveat. But the idea of having the self-centering scribe is really cool. That I mean, I've never seen that either myself. So that's a great one, Adam. How about tool number 2?
Tool number 2 is heavy and large, but you said it had to fit on the screen. It's not going to. I'm not going to hold it for that long because it weighs about 25 pounds, and what I'm holding looks like a socket wrench. That you would put a snap a socket onto, but much larger scale.
It looks like that. Was it the artist Oldenburg who made the great big?
Oh, Klaus Oldenburg. Yes.
Yeah. Great big. It looks like one of his things.
Yes, but what's interesting about this is not a socket wrench, but it is a gearbox, and this is entirely designed to enhance your torque application ability. So the reason I own this is because I have built a lot of cars, and usually when you are seating a wheel bearing in a car, there's a torque requirement. And some of them are manageable, and sometimes you need to use a breaker bar on your torque wrench, but sometimes they're not. And I've done a series of vintage Porsches, and the torque requirements are beyond my capability as a human being to tighten them successfully. So the way you use this is capable of applying 3,000 Newton meters of torque. And it enhances, it gears your torque application of ability up 4 to 1.
So actually, I don't know. So a normal human in good shape, how many newtons would they be able to apply?
You can, with a breaker bar, with an extension on a big ratchet, you can get to 1,000 Newton meters, but you can't get it. It's hard. So what this does is, if you put 1,000 Newton meters on the input shaft, you get 4,000 Newton meters, obviously geared down, so it's turning less, but you're able to torque these very high capacity bolts to their required limits without using an impact wrench and getting a very precise number.
Wow. And why don't you want to use electric? Why is it required to be done by hand?
It's a good question, because a lot of these bolts are torque to angle or torque to stretch. And so they have to be done, the torque application has to be done slowly and gradually. So an impact wrench does not, for example, it may hit the instantaneous value, but it hasn't stretched the bolt to its correct length or tension.
So the thing you're holding up, this thing, is not electric. It's just a lever of some sort.
It's a gearbox.
The gearbox. So it's geared up to take the
extra load.
Interesting. Wow, that is cool. And what do you call that?
A torque multiplier.
Torque multiplier, of course. And are there more than one? Is there a brand that's particularly better than the others? Are there a lot of them, or is that the only one?
I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know that this is a highly sought after device. So I was lucky to find this one, and I'm thrilled that I have it. It was really tough coming up with 4 choices for you, because I have a workshop full of arcane and esoteric things, for example, to swage the hydraulic lines on a Russian 14-cylinder radial engine.
I don't even know what swage that means in this context.
Swaging is the a circular crimping activity. So if you have a tube and you want to put a fitting on the end of it, you swage it on. It's not like normally crimping, for example, you would just squeeze with a pair of pliers, and that would be in two axes, just top and bottom. Swaging occurs all the way circumferentially around something. Okay. So I have all these weird tools, but I tried to get things that were, perhaps more accessible.
I appreciate that, and a torque multiplier certainly qualifies. So, so Adam, tell us about your third tool.
Okay, this is the most prosaic thing I chose. One of the things that I have learned,
and you held up a little tiny thing about 5 inches. It looks like a wrench handle.
Yeah. So this is it's about 3 inches long and about a half an inch in diameter, and it's got a through hole with a bearing in it, and it has a ramp clutch in it. So I can turn it in one direction smoothly, and it locks in the other direction.
Like a ratchet.
So it's like a stepless ratchet.
Oh, stepless. Okay.
But this is not for using with sockets. This is for using with these tiny screwdriver bits. And one of the things that I have learned over the years, particularly working on airplanes, is there are hundreds of fasteners where it's just simply not possible for me to get my body or a screwdriver in to tighten the fastener. Often when you're working under the instrument panel or you're working up in, let's say, a landing gear wheel well. And this device allows you to tighten a screw a 1/16 of an inch at a time up in the whole package fits in less than an inch.
Okay.
So you get the leverage that you would have from a long screwdriver handle. Because there are no steps in the ratchet, you can get a purchase anywhere you need to be. You don't have to be on a click, if you will.
Right. So how does it actually do that? Without as you can imagine, a ratchet being these little
yeah. So what's in here, you can't really see it, but there's something what looks like a bearing, and behind the bearing, behind each bearing, is a little ramp with a ball and a spring behind it. And that ramp, it's called a ramp clutch, and it locks the rotation of the bearing wherever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. And the ramps and balls stop it from retreating, yet you can turn with the direction of the ramp.
Wow. So a ramp clutch, which maybe something people should know.
So again, this is brandless. But again, this was a great find. This is one of those $9 on Amazon kind of things that has saved my life hundreds of times.
So if someone else would want to find it, what would they search for?
Well, this says Blue Point YA480B stamped on it. So I imagine if you typed Blue Point YA480B into a search engine, you would get something that approximately like this. I would just search under stepless ratchet and see what comes up.
Okay.
But or stepless ratchet screwdriver and see what comes up. But again, it's one of those things that I bought for a specific use case and have used it 1,000 times.
Wow.
In other scenarios.
Yeah, no, I certainly see all kinds of needs for getting to inaccessible places where sometimes I have the unratcheted version of those, little angle screwdrivers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have found those are great, but sometimes you need to only turn a little tiny bit. So
yeah. Well, great. Okay. Well, thank you. That is a nice find. That is a pretty general purpose use. The stepless ratcheted. No, not ratcheted.
Yeah. So they call them stepless ratchets, but you preferred misnomer.
Right.
All right. The last tool is I took some liberties here. So when you talk about things that I use every day, I'm holding in my hand a battery-powered oscilloscope. And an oscilloscope is something that allows you to visualize electric currents. And so you can look at the waveform of a particular signal. And I use this constantly because a lot of my work involves robotic controllers and motion. So the integration of mechanical systems with electrical and computer-based controls.
Right.
And one of the things that I find is I will be sitting looking at something going, I wonder if this is triggering correctly. I wonder if the voltage and current can be, I want to see them both simultaneously. And this is a device that allows me to have up to 4 inputs simultaneously. So I can look at voltage, current, frequency of a particular system.
Right.
And that allows me to diagnose what mistakes I've made.
Okay. So you're holding up something that's the size of, like, I don't know, a toaster.
Yeah, it's a small, a little smaller than a toaster. It's like a loaf of bread.
And it has a handle on it. You say it's battery powered. Is that important?
It is, because I often work on things, in an airplane hangar, or in the case of some of the hydrofoils, I'll have it in the water at a marina.
Yeah.
And I'll be struggling with, why is the hydraulic system not working?
Right.
And this allows me to have very granular understanding of the electrical port components.
So it's for field use, not just workshop use. So
Correct.
You want something that's battery powered, wireless. And I know that there's lots of makers of oscilloscopes. So is this particular brand and model better than others in your experience?
It's not necessarily better, but what it allows me to do, and the reason I chose it, is that what you care about is the clock rate of the channels. With the highest frequency that you can sample, and this triggers at several hundred gigahertz, which is a very useful upper bound. Typically oscilloscopes, the less expensive they are, the lower frequency range that they can cover.
So where would this fit in? Would this be at the high end?
No, this is not at the high end. This is a medium capability unit, but it is multiple trace and color, and it has. I mean, this is the beauty of the consumerization of electronics. I mean, when I was an engineer in school, a device like this would exist in a laboratory. It would have been built by Tektronix. It would have cost $10,000. And now, this is $400 on eBay. And, it's a very different world. But that the fact that it's come down in price in order of magnitude does not really relate to how useful it is. It is an incredibly powerful and wonderful piece of equipment.
So there's so what is either the name of the model number and what is the brand and
this is it's made by a company called Rygal. I think there are many Chinese manufacturers who build the same unit.
Okay.
This is a DS 1102, and I find it to be, it's been bulletproof. It has worked in cold, it has worked in wet, it has worked in my workshop, and it's covered with dust because I have it hooked up right now. I just pulled it off a project. Yeah. I'm building a large robotic sculpture, and it's in a part of the shop that gets a lot of machining sort of dust and things. And it does not get babied. It earns its keep.
So I have a little fluke voltmeter, and that's sort of like, that's about my level of understanding. This would probably require a little bit more sophisticated questioning. Is this a good tool to kind of learn how to use it?
Absolutely.
Or do you suggest like a YouTube course or something?
I was just going to say, that is the beauty of the modern world. And if you Google or you go on YouTube and search how to use an oscilloscope, there are wonderful tutorials. But it turns out that what you're testing with your fluke meter, which, by the way, my fluke meter happens to be sitting right here. you're testing voltage and continuity and occasionally current. With a device like this, with an oscilloscope, you can see the frequency response of the motor. You can see when it's turning on and off. You can actually look at how the events are unfolding. So if you have, for example, a stepper motor, you can look at the pulses that are controlling the stepper motor or a servo, and make sure that your timing and your software you've written is working correctly.
So, as someone who's never used an oscilloscope, although I've seen many of them around, are they easy to damage? Can you do something wrong? Or are they kind of built that way that
they're tougher. They're tougher than the stupidity. They understand the stupidity of the user, I think would be the best way to put it. There are usually great protections.
Okay.
It's very hard. As my friend who is a electrical phobe would say, the magic smoke tends to stay inside.
That's really good. Again, if you had a generic term to search for among the Chinese manufacturers, you're looking for like a
2 to 4 channel, digital
oscilloscope.
Digital oscilloscope. Yeah,
and that's basically it. It's okay.
So I hope that was an eclectic range of.
Very much so. I'm now kind of eager to hear what the rest of your collection, but we'll have to come back another time. It sounds like you're doing some really fantastic stuff, and I'm envious of your projects. But tell us about what you're passionate about these days. Maybe a project that you're working on. If you want to share.
I don't know if you can see the yellow car in the background.
Yeah, I do. But it's not moving.
It is not moving at the moment, but it does move. That is a 1974 E-Type Jaguar that a friend of mine from England dragged in here about 2 years ago and said in his lovely British accent, which I will not try to imitate, it's all broken and it leaks like a sieve. Let's make it electric.
Ah, boy.
So that is a spectacular conversion that has just been finished as of this week, after 2.5 years of work, to rip out the 5.3 liter cast iron V12 useless lump and replace it with a 56 kilowatt hour battery, a motor that generates 300 horsepower, which is, by the way, 50 horsepower more than the V12. Pull the battery, the fuel tank out, completely remake the car. Literally every single part of the car has been rebuilt, reimagined, repainted. And the entire front end of the car, was redesigned in CAD to accommodate all of the electrical systems.
Wow.
We had to design and invent an electric power steering rack, an electrically controlled heating system, all of the power distribution and management. And we now have a car that is lighter, faster, quieter, doesn't leak, and has been backdated. If you, again, for the Jaguar aficionados of the world, 74 was the ugliest and worst year because of nascent United States safety regulations. So it was saddled with hideous bumpers and the uncovered headlights. And so we backdated this to all of the most beautiful moments of the E-Type Jaguar, which has been called on numerous occasions the most beautiful car ever made.
Wow.
The 74 was not an instance of beautiful car, but we put the covered headlights back, all bumpers of 66, and done beautiful interior. And so now there is a fast, electric, quiet Jaguar for my friend to enjoy for the rest of his ownership.
So I have to confess I've watched a number of electric conversion videos on YouTube, ranging from the VW bugs to the campers to a bus, and I was surprised at how complicated and onerous those conversions were. You would think You
It,
take out the motor, you put in a electric motor, you take out the gas tank, you put in some batteries. But as you said, most of these vehicles wound up being
it's
remade in some capacity.
Oh, I mean, if this has been, I don't know, somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 hours of work.
Right.
This was not faint of heart. And it turns out that putting the motor in is trivial.
Yeah.
That is literally what you would imagine. It is designing a motor mount that picks up where the gas engine worked, drawing an adapter from where the flywheel and clutch plate used to sit between the motor and the drivetrain. That was 10% of the work.
Right.
On the other hand, there's 3 cooling loops and one for the battery, one for the controller, one for the heater. There's fluids everywhere. There's high voltage cables. There's power distribution units. There's the low voltage side of things. There's a CAN bus and all of the programming that you would have on a modern car to trigger things.
Right. So, what does that suggest about the prospect of future conversions? I mean, one of the things it says is that making an electric car from the scratch is going to be a much better idea, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question.
They use batteries that are part of the frame and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, like the hardest possible thing you could do is to make a conversion versus making a brand new, cool car.
I think there's an analogy to houses. It's dramatically more difficult to remodel a house than it is to build a new house. And, if you're trying to preserve the chimney and, the certain few walls, and you're working around an existing foundation, that's way tougher for a construction crew than to just say, scrape the ground,
right,
and build it up.
Okay.
So there's that. What I will say to your question about the future of conversions, there will be people who come out with specific kits for specific either types of vehicles or vehicle classes that are well engineered. So far, the people supplying the industry and the things you've watched on YouTube, I would call them well-intentioned hobbyists. And there are a few companies who claim to be providing sort of soup to nuts kits to do this. It is still not for the faint of heart. There is a lot of there's a lot of work, a lot of machining, a lot of welding to at least on our part to make this work. But I do think that will change. The question really is, how large is the market? How many people actually care? And those sorts of things. Yeah.
No, but it does seem kind of inevitable. I mean, I have a friend who got an old classic Cadillac of some era, and he's working on that one to convert it to electric. It seems to, I mean, there's a beauty in doing it that way. And, but it might be, as you said, it might be one-offs. It may not ever be enough of a market to really sustain this at large scale.
The other challenge is that, for example, like in the case of this Jaguar, the rear end, so the Jaguar has a very unusual rear suspension. It has something called inboard. Normally in a regular car, if you go out and look at your car in the driveway, the brakes are out near where the wheels are. You can see the discs and the calipers. The Jaguar, the brakes are inboard next to the differential, and the entire rear end is a unit with dual shocks and the inboard brakes and the differential and the drive shafts. I've never seen a car quite like this. And that rear end could only take a finite amount of torque. So we actually had to tune down the motor in software because the mechanical components weren't up to snuff to handle what this could do. So I think the conversions there's a lot of nuance, I guess, as opposed to just putting in a motor and some batteries.
Right. So you can certainly imagine kit homes that you make from new, but you can't imagine kit homes for a remodel.
Yeah, I mean, and there are people who are trying to do this. I mean, there are people who are saying, and there are one or two kits. There's one kit in particular that has gained a bit of notoriety, and that's for an old Land Rover Defender. And there's three reasons that one works. One is there's a large population around the world who like old Land Rovers. So there are thousands of them.
Right.
Second is it's a ladder frame to which a body is bolted, and the ladder frame has a ton of room in it. So you have a place to put batteries. And the old engine that was in it was very inefficient and very large. So you have place for a motor and the control equipment. So the combination of those three things has made that the go-to. I can think of two companies offering pretty good kits for that. Everything else is, you're kind of on your own.
I saw somebody doing kits for VW Bugs.
Yes.
Which there were, I don't know, 25 million.
Exactly. The question is, how many people care?
Yeah, that's right.
With the Land Rover, at least, there is a passionate community.
Yeah.
People who like old Land Rovers.
Right.
I think the bug aficionado community is a bit smaller.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's really fabulous. Thank you for taking time. And what a lucky friend you have.
Well, he is a dear and wonderful friend to our family, and it's been a joy. Thank you so much for including me. I enjoyed it very much.
Yes, thank you as well. I wish you best on your next project, whatever that might be. And thank you for taking time to share your tools.
It's a pleasure. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
This year, our Cool Tools blog will be 20 years old, which means we've been posting something new every day for 20 years. It's only possible because of the very engaged and knowledgeable readers and listeners like yourself. You've kept this place going, and we are very grateful for you. With this idea of 20 years in mind, we decided to try an experiment this year, and I'm inviting our guests and listeners to join me on our Cool Tool Show and Tell, which is the program that you're listening to right now. So if you feel you'd make a good guest on this podcast and have 4 uncommon tools that you'd like to share with us, please sign up on our form on the website, and we'll see about inviting you. You must be comfortable talking on a video, and you need to have some tools that you can show. We record on, as you know, on Zoom. We do a YouTube version, a video version of it, as well as an audible version. Fill out the form if you're interested, and list your 4 cool tools, and we'll see if there's a good fit. The applications aren't guaranteed in any way, and we're looking at tools that are new to us and appropriate tools, and whether the times will work for you. So we're really interested in hearing from people all over the world, not just in the US, although the tools have to be available online, easily available online. And if you are a longtime listener, you kind of know what the definition of our tools are. They're very broad. They can be anything that's handy, from something in the kitchen to something you use to travel, to a workshop, to something professional that we may not know about. We're really interested in things that we don't know anything about. So this is an open invitation. We'll give it a try. If you think you make a good guest for this podcast, fill out the form. There'll be a link somewhere on our website. And we look forward to chatting with you. Thank you.